longer I stay in Prague, the larger I'm getting, you know? Such good food. Well, Alex, thanks so much for taking the time. Very excited for our chat. I think one interesting place to begin, because I think most of the folks in the audience have an understanding of what Matter Labs does and the role and importance of zk in this industry and this ecosystem. Maybe walk us through the origin story and the core values that sort of underpin a firm that's based and rooted in technology, but maybe don't have anything to do with technology. I'm thinking freedom in particular.
Of course. So the origin of Matter Labs begins with my personal story. I was born in Ukraine. I grew up there. I moved to Germany when I was 12 or 20 or something. In Ukraine, I grew up in the period right after the collapse of Soviet Union, and I experienced firsthand the transformation of society in the lack of institutions and authorities. Well, they kind of still have power, but they're not performing the functions anymore, and they prevent people from actually being able to perform the functions. So the crime is rampant. I had hyperinflation for 2 years. Like I still remember it. I was a small kid, and then I moved to Germany, and I experienced a very different society, and also people, immigrants from Ukraine, from Russia, from Eastern Europe, doing much, much better once the rules of the game are changed and something is different. And like the very same people do much better. And I get very curious, like what is that? And like I started learning more and more about how society is organized. I was started as a programmer. I always was passionate about programming. I was like part of Ukrainian national team at IOI, International Olympiad Informatics. I really like the solving complex problems. Then I became a team lead. Then I grew to a CTO. I was CTO in a couple of companies, and I could see how the way you organize cooperation affects the productivity and the overall results. And the more I learned about the way you organize things, like on the local level at a team, on the global level at a nation or bigger than nation, the more I grew to appreciate the idea of freedom, like as this fundamental key that enables you, like everyone in society as a whole, to really get the maximum out of your potential. Because freedom leads to a lot more motivation. Like compared, like you have two different organizations. One is prescribed, like every single thing, like you're micromanaged, you're told what to do with like think North Korea, where people are like literally just being told every day what to do, where to move, like everything is completely organized. How big is motivation there? Versus like a more free country, but like where you work in a big corporation, where everything is kind of, your impact is minimal, and you have a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of rules, versus a small startup where everyone, like things are totally chaotic, but like you feel a lot of responsibility and you have a freedom because no one else like has time to manage you. Everyone is busy with their own things, right? The motivation, the outcomes, the learning curve is going to be tremendously different. And this works at a national or societal level either, the same way. And like we're here at Parallelny Polis, the Institute of Crypto-Anarchy, which is deeply inspired by the works of Austrian economists, by the like this libertarian classical liberalism school of thought, which is a heterodox school of thought, which is like it's going in the opposite direction of what the mainstream economics and political science is doing, for a reason. Because the mainstream school is heavily influenced by the state and has state-sponsored, and obviously certain ideas have more right to thrive there than in this free part of like academia and intellectual world. It works the same way. It's like when I started reading the libertarian and Austrian economist authors, my world perception just like changed from like it just went upside down. I was like, what? Like this is really how like it gives you a very interesting perspective on how the entire society is organized from a point of view of a single individual. Like you have these choices A and B. What you're gonna choose? Like in choice A, let's say I don't know, you have to work very hard and you're gonna get like a minimum wage. And choice B, you just do nothing, you go and get a subsidy from the state. Like, what is like, you know, like no hard work, you just sit home, watch TV, and you get paid like 1,000 euros in Germany or France or whatever. Like, what's going to be the, like, it's very obvious to you then what choices are going to be taken. Or, like, if you introduce rent controls, is it going to make the situation with apartment search like better or worse? You know, and the story goes on and on. Like, we don't have time now to dive into that, but like I got deeply impressed. And I became a fan of Austrian economics yet before Bitcoin. And then Bitcoin appeared, and I thought like, wow, this is a really interesting experiment. This is probably going to be a toy, it will always remain a toy. But it, like, if we could only somehow bind it to gold, maybe like this thing could work. But of course we had Liberty Reserve and e-gold just before Bitcoin. They collapsed. This is why Bitcoin was born. Because like you could not do it with centralized means. Like you needed something that is much more resilient. And this brings us to a very interesting place where we are today. The struggle for freedom is what we've seen throughout the entire history of civilization. Like whenever you had more freedom in a given space and time in history, we had a lot more creativity, innovation, motivation, and this led to prosperity. Think of Greek city-states, for example. Like they had, like it was a cluttered land with a lot of different policies, a lot of different political systems. They were competing, a lot of different things, and like you have this growth of science and culture and all the great philosophy from the time. And then at some point, Roman Empire takes over, makes a monolithic culture, monolithic state control being imposed on all these places, kill the Archimedes, and basically the progress comes to a halt for a couple of centuries. Then they fall, then there is a period of what's called Dark Ages, which was actually not that dark, but you kind of like, we don't know much about the certain periods, but then the Enlightenment comes, and you have again like the certain constellation of political actors, and changes in technology, changes in the like offensive versus defensive types of technologies, leads to a situation where the freedom flourishes once again. You have a lot of small states, you have the very strong church in the Western world, like, you know, like the papal state versus local small governance. No one has absolute power. The power balance is very subtle. And you have a thriving merchant culture, you have thriving, again, science, everything is on the rise. And then it transitions into the modernity with like the Industrial Revolution, and then it goes really parabolic. And now we experience that with the appearance of internet and mobile internet and blockchains and future AI and whatnot. So like whenever we have more freedom, it always leads to more creativity, and that leads to more prosperity. And
so what will a more scalable Ethereum mean for civilization in terms of freedom, in terms of cultural and technological innovation? What do you anticipate?
So the role of Ethereum, like let's start back with where we left it with Bitcoin. The greatest innovation of Bitcoin is giving an individual technology that gives you the power to withstand attacks from the most powerful actors in this world, from like super nation states. You know, if you have your Bitcoin key or Ethereum private key for that matter, all the supercomputers in the world cannot break it for you. So you have, it's yours truly. It's not that easy to attack you. The marginal cost of oppression is very, very high. It's like attacking one individual costs as much as attacking the entire, you know, like you can't go after one individual. You have to go through some different, you know, like you kind of have to get a consent from the entire society to try to oppress this one person. And this is what, like, Ethereum obviously extended the Bitcoin's resilience with a lot more flexibility in terms of programmability, and it brings us to this new paradigm called Web3, which is essentially the next generation of the internet, where like internet just gets supercharged with money and everything that touches value. And I believe that what we will see over the next couple of years is basically Web3 just takes over, and everything, like whatever internet has done to information, Web3 will do to the world of value. And everything that touches value will go on-chain, like from payments to exchange to trades to like all the even smaller things like tickets and like everything, property titles.
So before we get to that
Sure.
future, in the current environment, it's hyper-competitive, right? If you look at the landscape of scaling, right, you have ZK Sync, Polygon, Scroll. How do you sort of see each of these groups approaching the problem? And what are you guys doing differently? And is it zero-sum?
I think that what's happening is a lot of experimentation. We have different approaches. Like we were the first zk rollup actually working on Ethereum. We got initially a grant from the Ethereum Foundation, so we're really grateful for that. We had some freedom to experiment and try things out. And we launched the very first zkEVM live on Ethereum mainnet. The only other zkEVM live is Polygons, and we have Starkware as a generic purpose programming zk rollup, and that's basically the landscape today, what is live, and there are a couple of more projects in the works. The differences between the live ones are we are focusing a lot on the future compatibility. So like we're thinking about the ideal future world to which the final destination where we want to arrive at, and then we reverse engineer from there. What do we need to build for the architecture? Giving the restrictions, giving the prerequisites that we want to achieve there, namely, like we want to scale Ethereum fully preserving this original core values of freedom, resilience, trustlessness, inclusivity through full permissionlessness that are there. So like it's paramount for us to keep all of that just at fully limitless scale. Like where in the internet you don't have any inherent limits. There is no some magic number of like 1 million servers and you cannot exceed that, or like 1 million transactions, or like 1 billion requests per second, right? You can always just add more servers, more networks, and extend it in an arbitrary way. So like this is what we're doing. Like we're looking at that and we're saying, okay, what do we need to get there? So we realized, for example, that, and Starkware made the same choice, by the way, that you have to start with focusing on native zero-knowledge proofs first. Whereas most other projects that are working on zkEVM start with EVM compatibility to the highest degree first. We will eventually converge, but the priorities are important. So we start with something like, how do we build something that is going to be like, what is the world going to look like once zk takes over? And the fact that zk will take over is, I think, is broadly accepted. But like, if it's not obvious, like that's the only technology that gives us the ability to build this infinite, like limitless internet of scale, or internet of value. Nothing else works. Like all the bridges that we have today are having very, very fundamental inherent problems.
They're very scary.
They are, well, you have a lot of exploits precisely for these fundamental problems. Like you require a very high degree of trust. You have to introduce a lot of trust assumptions in those networks. And those trust assumptions can be abused. And this is what we see. Like most of the hacks are not on the smart contract level.
Yeah.
They are through like the malicious sector, or like the servers are compromised, or like things like this. So let's just take it for granted. Like zk is the only way for us to build this fully trustless infinite bridges. If that's the case, and we want to bring everything, like the entire world of value to Ethereum using zk, you have to start with something that gives you the absolute maximum efficiency. Like you don't build a new MacBook with the thought like, oh, I want to be running the old like programs that are like 10 years old in exact compatibility mode. No, you start with like a brand new chip like M1, M2, and then you tell everyone you have to recompile your programs for this new chip because that's going to give you the maximum efficiency. Now, after you have that, you can build an emulator which will run in simulation mode the older programs in compatibility mode, where like things will still work. You will have some trade-offs on efficiency, but like they will be like still functioning, like whatever is missing. Other projects, like except for Starkville. Starkville is also doing this. They just not using EVM. You can't really easily compile Solidity and run it for Starkville. You have to rewrite everything in a new language, which I think is a very high barrier entry for a lot of like, you have to rebuild the entire ecosystem from scratch. So we thought like this is unacceptable for us. We need to stay in the open paradigm, in the open standards of Ethereum. But everyone else is trying to build the EVM equivalents first. We're like, let's just like get something to work exactly the way Ethereum works. That's going to give you a lot of performance penalty, and eventually it will be very hard to go from EVM equivalents to this maximum. You can do the other way around. You cannot first build in like computer that simulates like an old architecture and then say let's supercharge it with like highly performant applications, if that makes sense.
So, but you still have to go through the process of decentralization. What do you think are the biggest hurdles to properly decentralizing rollups? Are the HW requirements already still too high, or is it an acceptable threshold? And what might be some of the challenges with effective, orderly governance?
So let's start with technical challenges, then talk about the governance. On the technical side, the big hurdle was the proof generation, like the requirements to run the prover was relatively high. It's now going down to consumer GPUs. Like all of the proofs, like we now have technology, we have something that will run just on consumer GPUs, and we basically can leverage all the existing mining farms for people who were previously mining things on GPUs. They will all switch over to generate the proofs for like snarks for zk-based chains. So that is solved. Like there will be marketplaces for this, but like fundamentally there will the memory requirements, the GPU requirements are now like falling down to very low. With recursion, because we can generate smaller circuits, like we can prove smaller circuits and they recursively aggregate basically any number of them in a single snark, which then finalizes the block on Ethereum. That is not a problem. A bigger problem would be data availability, in that like you can only build something limitless in this network if you extend the zk rollup data availability paradigm with something external that works off-chain, and then there is a challenge like how do you like you degrade the security somewhat.
Yeah.
Right.
You open up an attack vector there.
So this is an ongoing research area of what's the best way to do it in the most decentralized way. How do we build something that does not rely on analyzed majority? So this is I can't yet talk deeply about the outcomes of this research. It's ongoing, but like we will have something that is more or less comparable. Like it's not 100% of security from Ethereum, but like maybe 99, 98%. And that's going to be acceptable for a lot of cases. And then like really big transactions, really big amounts of funds, you will have to keep in zk rollups. And Ethereum itself is moving forward with proto-dunk sharding and then dunk sharding and then like proper sharding, where we'll have, and we just had the previous talk about that, like we'll have a much more scalable bandwidth for zk rollups. So I expect everyone in the world, and we expect the world population to stabilize around 10 billion people. I think everyone will have a chance to have their own accounts in zk rollups, to have like 100% security from Ethereum for most of their like
What's
portfolio.
the size ceiling?
It's not about the size; it's about the transaction cost. Like the cost of transaction. Like like if you're gonna have like if 10 billion people have, let's say, 10 accounts each, you have 100 billion accounts. If they transact once per month, you can calculate back from there what's the TPS for rollups is going to be like to support just the basic population needs for just moving funds from your savings account to your current accounts, which is likely going to be on something like zkPorter, right? So those are technical challenges which I think they're solvable. Now, on the governance side, there are a lot of experiments with governance going on. Like, we definitely want to move as fast as possible to a system where there is no single honest majority that can dictate anything. Like, for example, upgrading a rollup should not be done by the team, should not be done even by a multi-sig of like the team plus some security committee. Like, it should be done by broad acceptance of the users of a given L2. And whoever is the minority who do not agree with the new upgrade should have a chance to exit in a very cheap, very affordable, and very timely manner to a different L2 that they trust more. This is very fundamental. Now, the challenge here is we can't really do it the same way as on L1 because the L2s are not forkable. If you have native Ether or native other like L1 assets locked in a single L2, like they have to stay there. They have to be governed by the rules of the smart contracts. And like while things like upgrades with time lock are now becoming standard, everyone will embrace them. We have them for zk Sync Lite for the first version of the protocol, like this basic proof of concept for payments. We will use them for zk Sync Era, the zkEVM, as soon as we're out of alpha. But that's not enough because time lock upgrades do not protect you from like urgent vulnerabilities in the protocol, which are inevitable in the early phase of development, and we want to be doing like more frequent, like rollouts of new features and so on. So like for that part, I think we'll have to stick to Security Council and maybe some other more interesting ideas with like broader Ethereum governance maybe can step in somehow. Which Vitalik recently criticized in his blog post about the overloading of social consensus of Ethereum. So this is also a very interesting research area. Not how you govern, like things like protocol treasury, for example, or how you give grants. You can afford to experiment in different ways. You can do liquid democracy. You can empower people to vote. You can have delegates because a lot of people are going to be passive naturally. They will not be actively participating in this voting. But this hard governance of upgrades and like what the security issues, it remains a big challenge of the protocol. So happy to, like, if you guys have ideas, happy to talk after.
As long as there's just clear communication, though. Because that's what we've seen historically in this industry is communication hiccups can lead to confusion, which leads to a whole slew of problems and animosity towards the people running the show.
I fully agree. We have to be extremely transparent about the risks, about like if you're doing the governance in a way that like manages treasury or whatever, you have to be very, very clear, very crisp in communication to avoid misreadings. Like your words will always be taken out of context and will be like abused and so on. So you have to be like always very precise in the way you communicate. But especially what concerns the security, the risks, like the protocol itself. Like when people trust your money, their money with a certain protocol, they have to be really aware of what are the risks. And we're in very early days for all the L2s. Even like optimistic rollups that are older get some vulnerabilities. They get some patches from time to time. Like none of us is free from that, right? So the bugs are always a reality, and we'll have to deal with them.
So I'm curious what maybe keeps you up at night. If I'm thinking about myself, it's one Chair Gensler over at the SEC. Is it the regulatory environment, perhaps, or is it something more technical? And in terms of a potential token, does Mr. Gensler's crusade against crypto make that any less likely?
I have to honestly say, like, I have a really good sleep these days. Like,
Well, we were
it was
just talking backstage. We both slept like 12 hours last night.
Yeah, this is true. So, like, these days, I feel much more confident about both aspects. The technical things, like we have, with regard to security, for example, like this was something that kept me up at night a couple of years ago. I'm feeling much better now because we have security in depth. Like ZK Sync spent more money from what I can gather in public sources. Like we're close to $4 million on audits and public contests in security alone, and we are doing like a multifaceted approach to this. Not just like you don't rely just on audits. You don't rely just on open sourcing and crowdsourced security. You do more things. You think like through scenarios, like what can happen if there is a compromise, like how you can mitigate that, how can you like cover the damages, how can you limit the damages to something that is going to be bearable, and so on. So we have a lot of this in-depth security these days, and we have spoken about that on Twitter and our public communication. That gives me pretty high degree of certainty that we're going to be fine there. On the regulatory side, I think that there are people who are openly anti-crypto in certain countries. There are other countries that are very pro-crypto, very friendly. They're embracing of this new progress leaning ideas, and also within the countries like the US, there is a very strong pro-crypto movement in the government, in the Congress, and in Senate, and in the political establishment overall. And we're going to see some battle, but like they cannot go against people. Like I really like the initiative of Coinbase to display in the Coinbase app the stance of your politician in like your phone number of a politician, so you can call them and share your like. This is the beauty of crypto. This is the beauty of tokens.
We have nothing better to do except call our legislators.
Well, like just being there, just showing your like just like aligning incentives of a huge amount of people using this technology, using something like tokens, fungible tokens, or NFTs, is massive. This is something we never had in the history before, where we can individually just say, like, these people have something in common and they are capable of collective action. And they all know that, like, that everyone else is, like, it's game theoretical. It's like, it's in everyone's interest to create pressure on politicians to behave properly and like to push the status quo. You're not isolated anymore. This is what internet has done to information originally. Like before internet, you only had television, radio, newspapers, fairly centralized. The editors, the publishers there had a lot of soft power and hard power. They were
very powerful,
tightly connected to politicians. And now the internet like has disrupted all of that, right? Because now the media is decentralized, and you have a lot of everyone can become their own blogger and influencer. And if you're smart and you have a lot of interesting ideas and you can engage people, you can easily go to like millions of followers, or maybe not easily, but like you have you don't have to ask for permission. It's permissionless. It's meritocracy. It's like your ideas are stronger, so people like you, and your voice is gonna get stronger. You don't have to get the consent from certain political parties, and this changes the dynamics. And with tokens, with the Internet of Value, it changes the dynamics even further. They cannot attack it individually. We had the example of BitTorrent war, where like the publishers of content were like trying to shut it down, and it failed because you can't really oppose the popular movement. If the majority of people don't support an idea, you will look like an oppressor. But with BitTorrent, like the incentives was like lower. Like it's just personal for you. Like either you pay $1 per song or $5 per movie, or you download it and you use it. Here it's a lot more powerful with tokens and the value of these tokens and the price going up and down depending on certain actions. Like people are feeling like very, very engaged in this kind of a lot more motivation, because of the protective properties of cryptography that like keep you there. These powerful guys cannot just go to one organization and say, shut down all of these tokens. You can't write a letter to Bitcoin. You can't write a letter to Ethereum. It's just there. It's the fact that you have to deal with it. This is really cool.
So when token?
This is a good question. I like this question, but I never say like not going to answer this question. I always do. And the token is something that has to be organic. Like you have to need it.
Yeah. So
like the moment you need it,
yeah,
there will be a token, right? So like for certain things, you do not need a token. To use zkSync, you do not need a token. To pay gas, you don't need any specific token. Like we figured that it's the UX is going to be one of the key enablers of mass adoption. So if you have to, like a friend of mine received 1,000 USDC for some job on his in crypto, so he had to create his wallet. He got the money there, and then he wanted to send it to his bank account. And he came to me and said, like, oh, I can't, like, how do I do it? It says I don't have enough funds to pay fees. How come? I have $1,000 there. And I'm like, well, you need the Ether to pay the gas fees. And you're like, yeah, I already figured that out. So I tried to convert my USDC to Ether. But it told me that to convert, I need some Ether in the first place. Where do I get it? Like, this is catch-22 type of situation, which is like just ridiculous. It's absurd, right? So in zkSync, that would not be a problem, because we have native account abstraction for all accounts. Like EAP 457 leads the way on mainnet for smart wallets, but you can't really use it with with EOAs, right? With MetaMask, you can't really use like gasless transactions or like someone else pays fees for you. But like on zkSync you can. So he would be able to just send USDC to any other account, to an exchange, whatever, and pay fees in the sense. Like you don't need the token to use zkSync. You don't need a token to to secure the network, because it's secured by Ethereum itself, right? But you might need it for certain functions, like to decentralize the network. There is no better way to do it permissionlessly, but to have something to give people like you have to have some stake, which depends on the success of the network. We can't really use Ether to secure the validators to create decentralized sequencer, because if we use Ether, then no matter like you behave properly or you censor people or you do some other nasty things, the price of your collateral is going to remain the same, right? So it has to be correlated. It's like that would be one thing where it's organically needed. There are more things, like to decentralize the governance in general. Same thing. Like your governance decisions have to be tied to this collateral. There has to be established some link. So for those things, once we come closer to that, we need them, the token will become necessary, and then like that is going to dictate the actions of the protocol, which is going to be which has to be decentralized. Like Meta Labs is just the creator, humble creator of zkSync, which will be one of many contributors, just like Ethereum Foundation is one of many contributors to the Ethereum ecosystem. But it's actually everyone is contributing. Like a lot of companies, a lot of individuals, researchers, hackers are working making Ethereum stronger, and we envision the same for zkSync, which is just an extension. It's a layer of computation, a layer of scalability on top of that.
Maybe we can take the last few minutes.
Absolutely.
Are we taking questions? I don't know. This guy is ready.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if you hear me, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. My question is around the SEC, right? I mean, of course, Bitcoin and Ethereum, they're decentralized. It's nice and beautiful. We love that. But the SEC can go after the Ethereum. It's not that because he didn't say whether Ethereum is security or not during the hearing in the US, that he's not thinking about a strategy to attack it, right? The SEC has had a 100% win rate, right, against their cases. So we really have to think about that possibility. They can even go after the Ethereum Foundation in Switzerland if they wanted to, even if it's not their jurisdiction, but they can. They have done it in the past. So what do we do as a community to fight the SEC? I mean, obviously you can vote them out, right? I mean, next year at the state level and obviously at the presidential level. But I think we are underestimating that threat. And how do we feel about that? I mean, we've seen what's happened recently, right? And the market overreaction of last night, etc. So is that the end of it?
We can all learn Krav Maga and head down to Maryland. Just kidding. What do you think?
That's a good question. So, like, I am much less worried because we have investors like pretty strong investors from the US. For example, Andreessen Horowitz led our Series B round. They are very active in DC and engaged with politicians and in the efforts to educate people about these new technologies. And I know that the stance of political establishment in the US is not homogeneous. It's not like everyone is just against crypto. There are a lot of open-minded people and a lot of really, really powerful people. So like, for example, the head of the Financial Committee of Congress is very pro-crypto. He has some really, really tough questions, Mr. Gensler, at the hearings. And there are many others. So like, on the one hand, this is the result of this like popular adoption of Ethereum and Bitcoin and crypto in general in the US, which creates this motive for politicians to like, our voters are users of this technology, our creators are like, there are jobs at place, we have to protect them. Like it's not just something like completely irrelevant. On the other hand, let's imagine that they succeed. So they attack Ethereum. What does it mean? Like they can ban Ethereum from exchanges in the US, but not from like, okay, or they can attack Ethereum Foundation, fine. Will Ethereum survive without Ethereum Foundation or without them if they are getting crippled or like they are being fined or whatever? Of course we will survive. Like it's like we're way past that point where we will depend on Vitalik, on Ethereum Foundation or someone else, right? We are much stronger now. Like Ethereum will survive, will continue to thrive. If it's going to be banned in one country, well, that's going to be a pity, but like it's not going to be banned in Switzerland and Singapore and Malta and the UK and other places. So the world is decentralized already. There is no like global world government, and by using crypto, we can push for the status quo to improve, not to get worse. So like we want to prevent that huge totalitarian global state from appearing and like protect our freedom by using this technology. That's our mission.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you all guys.